The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on Samuel McKinnon's weathered face as he guided his prized stallion. Thunder, along the dusty trail. The year was 1887, and Samuel had been traveling for 3 weeks straight, carrying nothing but hope in his saddlebags and dreams of striking it rich in the silver mines of Colorado. His once prosperous ranch in Texas had fallen victim to a devastating drought, forcing him to sell everything except his beloved horse. Thunder was no ordinary stallion. The magnificent black Arabian had been Samuel's companion for 7 years. A gift from his late father, who had bred horses for the cavalry, the animal possessed an intelligence that seemed almost human, responding to Samuel's slightest gesture and displaying a loyalty that had saved his master's life more than once during Apache raids in the borders. As the afternoon shadows grew longer, Samuel noticed smoke rising from a valley below. His water supply had dwindled to mere drops, and Thunder's labored breathing told him the horse needed rest desperately. Against his better judgment about approaching unknown camps in Apache territory, Samuel decided to investigate. The alternative was potentially dying of thirst in the unforgiving desert. The small Apache encampment consisted of 4 weathered teepees arranged in a semicircle around a central fire. An elderly Apache man sat alone by the flames, his silver hair braided with eagle feathers and turquoise beads. His deeply lined face bore the marks of countless seasons under the desert sun, and his dark eyes held a wisdom that seemed to pierce straight through Samuel's soul. Samuel dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible and speaking in the few Apache words he had learned from friendly traders. The old man gestured for him to approach, offering water from a clay vessel without a word. The cool liquid tasted like salvation itself, and Samuel drank gratefully while Thunder was led to a small stream by a young Apache boy who appeared from behind one of the teepees. The elderly Apache introduced himself as Running Bear, a medicine man whose tribe had been decimated by cavalry attacks and disease. Only a handful of survivors remained, struggling to maintain their traditional ways in an increasingly hostile world. Samuel shared his own story of loss and hardship, finding unexpected common ground with this proud warrior who had also seen his world crumble. As evening approached, Running Bear invited Samuel to share their meager meal of rabbit stew and cornbread. The conversation flowed surprisingly easily, conducted in a mixture of broken English, Spanish, and hand gestures. Samuel learned that Running Bear's grandson, Little Wolf, had been gravely ill for months, and traditional remedies had proven ineffective. The nearest town with a doctor was 3 days' ride away, but they had no horse capable of making such a journey. That night, Samuel lay beneath a canopy of brilliant stars, listening to the haunting sound of Apache prayers carried on the desert wind. Thunder grazed peacefully nearby, seemingly content in this temporary sanctuary. Samuel's mind wrestled with a growing realization that fate had brought him to this place for a reason beyond mere coincidence. The next morning brought shocking news. Little Wolf's condition had worsened dramatically during the night, and his fever had spiked dangerously high. Running Bear's wife, a dignified woman named Morningstar, wept quietly as she tended to the unconscious boy. The other tribal members gathered in solemn silence, their faces reflecting the helplessness of watching a loved one slip away. Samuel approached Running Bear with a proposition that surprised even himself. He offered to trade Thunder for a single silver dollar, knowing full well that his magnificent stallion was worth hundreds of times that amount. The trade would allow Running Bear to ride Thunder to town and bring back a doctor, while Samuel would remain with the tribe to help care for Little Wolf. Running Bear studied Samuel's face intently, searching for any sign of deception or hidden motive. When he found none, the old medicine man reached into a small leather pouch and withdrew a tarnished silver dollar, one of only 2 coins the tribe possessed. The transaction was completed with a simple handshake, witnessed by the morning sun and sealed by mutual respect as Running Bear prepared for his desperate journey. Samuel helped secure medical supplies and provisions for the grueling ride. Thunder seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, standing patiently as unfamiliar hands adjusted his saddle and bridle. The stallion's intelligent eyes met Samuel's one final time, and an unspoken promise passed between them. Running Bear departed at dawn, Thunder's powerful strides carrying them swiftly toward the distant town. Samuel watched until they disappeared into the shimmering heat waves, then turned his attention to Little Wolf, who lay burning with fever in the medicine teepee. Using knowledge gained from his own experiences with sick livestock, Samuel helped Morning Star apply cool compresses and administer herbal teas. The waiting began in earnest, each hour stretching like an eternity as the boy's condition fluctuated between hopeful improvement and frightening decline. Samuel found himself praying to both his Christian God and the Apache spirits, desperately hoping that his sacrifice would not be in vain. During the long vigil, other tribal members shared stories of Running Bear's wisdom and Little Wolf's promising future as a potential leader. Samuel learned about Apache customs and traditions, gaining insights into a culture he had previously known only through fearful tales and newspaper accounts. These people were not the savage warriors depicted in dime novels, but rather a proud nation fighting to preserve their heritage against overwhelming odds. As the third day dawned with no sign of Running Bear's return, doubt began to creep into Samuel's mind. Had he made a terrible mistake? Was his beloved Thunder now lost forever, along with his last hope of reaching Colorado? The weight of his decision pressed down upon him like the oppressive desert heat, and he wondered if his impulsive act of compassion would ultimately prove to be his downfall. Little Wolf stirred restlessly, his small body racked with fever dreams, while Morning Star continued her patient vigil. Samuel realized that regardless of the outcome, he had crossed a line from which there could be no return. His fate was now inextricably linked to this small Apache family, bound by a simple transaction that had transformed a business deal into something approaching sacred obligation. The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on Samuel Mickennen's weathered face as he guided his prize stallion. Thunder along the dusty trail. The year was 1887, and Samuel had been traveling for 3 weeks straight, carrying nothing but hope in his saddlebags and dreams of striking it rich in the silver mines of Colorado. His once prosperous ranch in Texas had fallen victim to a devastating drought, forcing him to sell everything except his beloved horse. Thunder was no ordinary stallion. The magnificent black Arabian had been Samuel's companion for 7 years. A gift from his late father, who had bred horses for the cavalry, the animal possessed an intelligence that seemed almost human, responding to Samuel's slightest gesture and displaying a loyalty that had saved his master's life more than once during Apache raids in the Borda. As the afternoon shadows grew longer, Samuel noticed smoke rising from a valley below. His water supply had dwindled to mere drops, and Thunder's labored breathing told him the horse needed rest desperately. Against his better judgment about approaching unknown camps in Apache territory, Samuel decided to investigate. The alternative was potentially dying of thirst in the unforgiving desert. The small Apache encampment consisted of 4 weathered teepees arranged in a semicircle around a central fire. An elderly Apache man sat alone by the flames, his silver hair braided with eagle feathers and turquoise beads. His deeply lined face bore the marks of countless seasons under the desert sun, and his dark eyes held a wisdom that seemed to pierce straight through Samuel's soul. Samuel dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible and speaking in the few Apache words he had learned from friendly traders. The old man gestured for him to approach, offering water from a clay vessel without a word. The cool liquid tasted like salvation itself, and Samuel drank gratefully, while Thunder was led to a small stream by a young Apache boy who appeared from behind one of the teepees. The elderly Apache introduced himself as Running Bear, a medicine man whose tribe had been decimated by cavalry attacks and disease. Only a handful of survivors remained, struggling to maintain their traditional ways in an increasingly hostile world. Samuel shared his own story of loss and hardship, finding unexpected common ground with this proud warrior who had also seen his world crumble. As evening approached, Running Bear invited Samuel to share their meager meal of rabbit stew and cornbread. The conversation flowed surprisingly easily, conducted in a mixture of broken English, Spanish, and hand gestures. Samuel learned that Running Bear's grandson, Little Wolf, had been gravely ill for months. Traditional remedies had proven ineffective. The nearest town with a doctor was 3 days' ride away. but they had no horse capable of making such a journey. That night, Samuel lay beneath a canopy of brilliant stars, listening to the haunting sound of Apache prayers carried on the desert wind. Thunder grazed peacefully nearby, seemingly content in this temporary sanctuary. Samuel's mind wrestled with a growing realization that fate had brought him to this place for a reason beyond mere coincidence. The next morning brought shocking news. Little Wolf's condition had worsened dramatically during the night, and his fever had spiked dangerously high. Running Bear's wife, a dignified woman named Morning Star, wept quietly as she tended to the unconscious boy. The other tribal members gathered in solemn silence, their faces reflecting the helplessness of watching a loved one slip away. Samuel approached, running Bear with a proposition that surprised even himself. He offered to trade Thunder for a single silver dollar, knowing full well that his magnificent stallion was worth hundreds of times that amount. The trade would allow Running Bear to ride Thunder to town and bring back a doctor, while Samuel would remain with the tribe to help care for Little Wolf. Running Bear studied Samuel's face intently, searching for any sign of deception or hidden motive. When he found none, the old medicine man reached into a small leather pouch and withdrew a tarnished silver dollar, one of only 2 coins the tribe possessed. The transaction was completed with a simple handshake, witnessed by the morning sun and sealed by mutual respect as Running Bear prepared for his desperate journey. Samuel helped secure medical supplies and provisions for the grueling ride. Thunder seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, standing patiently as unfamiliar hands adjusted his saddle and bridle. The stallion's intelligent eyes met Samuel's one final time, and an unspoken promise passed between them. Running Bear departed at dawn, Thunder's powerful strides carrying them swiftly toward the distant town. Samuel watched until they disappeared into the shimmering heat waves, then turned his attention to Little Wolf, who lay burning with fever in the medicine teepee. Using knowledge gained from his own experiences with sick livestock, Samuel helped Morning Star apply cool compresses and administer herbal teas. The waiting began in earnest, each hour stretching like an eternity as the boy's condition fluctuated between hopeful improvement and frightening decline. Samuel found himself praying to both his Christian God and the Apache spirits, desperately hoping that his sacrifice would not be in vain. During the long vigil, other tribal members shared stories of Running Bear's wisdom and Little Wolf's promising future as a potential leader. Samuel learned about Apache customs and traditions, gaining insights into a culture he had previously known only through fearful tales and newspaper accounts. These people were not the savage warriors depicted in dime novels, but rather a proud nation fighting to preserve their heritage against overwhelming odds. As the third day dawned with no sign of Running Bear's return, doubt began to creep into Samuel's mind. Had he made a terrible mistake? Was his beloved Thunder now lost forever, along with his last hope of reaching Colorado? The weight of his decision pressed down upon him like the oppressive desert heat, and he wondered if his impulsive act of compassion would ultimately prove to be his downfall. Little Wolf stirred restlessly, his small body racked with fever dreams, while Morning Star continued her patient vigil. Samuel realized that regardless of the outcome, he had crossed a line from which there could be no return. His fate was now inextricably linked to this small Apache family, bound by a simple transaction that had transformed a business deal into something approaching sacred obligation. Dr. Whitmore departed that afternoon on a borrowed Apache pony, promising to return within the month to check on Little Wolf's progress. Samuel watched the dust cloud disappear into the eastern distance, then turned to face his new reality. The silver dollar felt warm in his palm, its weight somehow heavier than before, despite being the same modest coin. Running Bear invited Samuel to sit beside the central fire, where the remainder of the tribe had gathered in council formation. The old medicine man spoke at length in Apache, his weathered hands gesturing toward Samuel periodically. Though Samuel could not understand the words, the respectful tone and solemn atmosphere suggested something significant was being discussed. Morning Star approached, Samuel with Little Wolf in her arms. The boy was weak, but alert, his dark eyes studying the white man who had helped save his life. In halting English, She explained that Running Bear had been sharing the prophecy that had guided him throughout his years as a medicine man. According to tribal oral tradition, a time would come when their people would need to adapt and change in order to survive, and this transformation would be aided by an unlikely ally from the outside world. The prophecy spoke of a pale rider who would arrive during their darkest hour, offering something precious in exchange for almost nothing. And through this act of sacrifice, new possibilities would be born. Running Bear believed that Samuel's arrival and his willingness to trade thunder for a single dollar had fulfilled the first part of this ancient prediction. Samuel listened with growing amazement as Morning Star translated her husband's words. He had never considered himself particularly spiritual or mystical, but the coincidences were becoming difficult to dismiss. His arrival at the exact moment when Little Wolf needed medical attention, his impulsive decision to make such an unusual trade, and Dr. Whitmore's willingness to undertake the dangerous journey all seemed to align too perfectly to be mere chance. Over the following days, Samuel learned more about the tribe's desperate situation. They were among the last free Apache bands, having refused relocation to government reservations where conditions were reportedly harsh and freedom severely restricted. Their traditional hunting grounds had been claimed by white settlers, and game animals had become increasingly scarce due to overhunting and environmental changes. The 4 surviving families represented different clans that had banded together for mutual protection and support. Besides Running Bear's immediate family, there was an elderly widow named Silvermoon with her teenage daughter Laughing Water, a middle-aged warrior called Stone Bear with his wife and infant son, and a young couple named Swift Arrow and Singing Bird who had recently lost their own child to disease. Each family possessed unique skills and knowledge that contributed to the group's survival. Silvermoon was an expert at gathering medicinal plants and preparing traditional remedies. Stone Bear was their primary hunter and protector, though advancing age and old injuries from cavalry battles had diminished his effectiveness. Swift Arrow and Singing Bird were skilled at crafts and trade goods that could occasionally be bartered with Mexican merchants for essential supplies. Samuel quickly recognized that his own background in ranching and horse training could be valuable to the group. During his years in Texas, he had learned to identify water sources, read weather patterns, and manage livestock under difficult conditions. More importantly, his status as a white man might provide certain advantages in dealings with government officials and traders who were often hostile or suspicious toward Apache people as Little Wolf's health continued to improve. Samuel found himself naturally assuming responsibilities around the camp. He helped repair teepee covers damaged by desert winds, showed Stone Bear more efficient techniques for tracking game animals, and taught Laughing Water basic English phrases that might prove useful in future encounters with white settlers. The work was physically demanding but spiritually rewarding in ways Samuel had not experienced since his childhood on his father's ranch. There was a sense of purpose and community that had been missing from his solitary journey toward Colorado's mining camps. Each day brought new challenges and small victories that contributed to the group's collective survival. Running Bear observed Samuel's integration into tribal life with quiet satisfaction. The old medicine man had lived through countless hardships and betrayals, learning to read character in the subtle details of a person's actions rather than their words. Samuel's consistent willingness to contribute without being asked, his respectful treatment of women and elders, and his genuine concern for Little Wolf's recovery all confirmed Running Bear's initial assessment. One evening, as Samuel helped gather firewood for the night's warmth, Running Bear approached with a proposal that would change everything. Speaking through Morning Star's translation, the medicine man outlined a vision that went beyond simple survival. He believed that the traditional Apache way of life could be preserved and even strengthened by selectively adopting certain elements of white civilization while maintaining their core cultural values. The plan was ambitious and unprecedented. Rather than fleeing deeper into Mexico or accepting reservation life, Running Bear wanted to establish a permanent settlement that could serve as a bridge between Apache and white communities. This settlement would offer services that both cultures needed: horse training, guide services for travelers, translation and negotiation assistance, and trade in crafts and medicinal plants. Samuel would play a crucial role in this enterprise, serving as the primary liaison with white authorities and business partners. His knowledge of ranching and his reputation for honesty would be essential in establishing trust and credibility. In return, he would become a full member of the tribe with all the rights and responsibilities that membership entailed. The proposal was both exciting and terrifying. Samuel had never imagined himself becoming part of an Apache community, and the risks involved were enormous. Failure could result in imprisonment, death, or worse for all involved. Success, however, might create something entirely new, a model for peaceful coexistence that could benefit both cultures. That night, Samuel lay awake, contemplating the magnitude of the decision before him. His original plan to seek fortune in Colorado's silver mines seemed suddenly small and selfish compared to the possibility of helping create a new future for Running Bear's people. The silver dollar in his pocket had somehow become a symbol of transformation rather than mere currency. Thunder grazed peacefully nearby, seemingly content with their extended stay in the desert camp. The Stallion's presence had made the journey to fetch Dr. Whitmore possible, and his continued presence would be essential to any future plans. Samuel realized that his impulsive decision to trade the horse had set in motion a chain of events that was far from finished. As dawn approached, bringing with it the sounds of the camp awakening to another day of challenges and possibilities, Samuel made his decision. He would accept Running Bear's proposal and commit himself fully to this unprecedented experiment in cultural cooperation. The path ahead was uncertain and fraught with dangers, but it offered something he had been seeking without realizing it, a chance to be part of something larger than himself. When Samuel announced his decision to the assembled tribe members that morning, the response was immediate and heartfelt. Running Bear spoke a formal blessing. Morning Star presented him with a traditional Apache shirt decorated with meaningful symbols, and even Little Wolf managed a weak but genuine smile from his recovery bed. Samuel McKinnon, former Texas rancher and would-be Colorado prospector, had found his true calling in the most unexpected place imaginable. The transformation of Samuel's life began immediately. Running Bear conducted a traditional ceremony that formally welcomed him into the tribe, giving him the Apache name He Who Shares Thunder in honor of his willingness to trade his precious stallion. The ceremony involved sacred smoke, ancient chants, and the presentation of a medicine bag containing items representing his new identity and responsibilities. Within days, Samuel was accompanying Stone Bear on hunting expeditions, learning to read the desert's subtle signs in ways his ranching experience had never taught him. The Apache warrior showed him how to track animals by the faintest impressions in sand, how to locate water sources by observing bird flight patterns, and how to move silently through terrain that seemed impossibly open and exposed. The lessons went beyond practical survival skills. Stone Bear shared the spiritual aspects of hunting, the importance of taking only what was needed, offering prayers of gratitude to the animals that gave their lives, and maintaining the delicate balance between predator and prey that sustained all life in the harsh desert environment. Samuel's own knowledge proved equally valuable to his Apache teachers. His understanding of horse behavior and training techniques revolutionized the tribe's approach to their small herd of ponies. Within weeks, animals that had been difficult to manage became responsive and reliable, dramatically improving the group's mobility and hunting success. More importantly, Samuel began teaching English to the younger tribal members while learning Apache himself. Language skills would be crucial to Running Bear's vision of establishing successful relationships with white authorities and traders. Laughing Water proved particularly gifted, mastering complex conversations with remarkable speed and enthusiasm. When Dr. Whitmore returned a month later as promised, he found Little Wolf completely recovered and the entire camp transformed. The boy was running and playing with normal childhood energy, his earlier brush with death seeming like a distant nightmare. The doctor was amazed by the complete recovery and impressed by the obvious improvements in the tribe's overall health and morale. During his visit, Dr. Whitmore listened with growing interest as Samuel and Running Bear outlined their ambitious plans for establishing a permanent settlement. The physician recognized the potential benefits such an arrangement might offer to his own struggling practice. A strategically located settlement could serve as a way station for travelers, a source of guides and interpreters, and a center for treating both Apache and white patients in the region. The doctor proposed a partnership that would make him the settlement's primary physician while allowing him to maintain his practice in Copper Creek. He would visit regularly to provide medical services and help train tribal members in basic healthcare techniques. In exchange, the settlement would recommend his services to travelers and provide him with access to traditional Apache medicinal knowledge that might complement his Western medical training. This partnership represented exactly the kind of mutually beneficial relationship Running Bear had envisioned. Dr. Whitmore's involvement would provide credibility and legitimacy in the eyes of white authorities, while his medical expertise would help ensure the settlement's long-term survival and growth. Over the following months, the small band began scouting locations for their permanent settlement. They needed a site with reliable water, defensible terrain, and convenient access to established trade routes. After extensive exploration, they identified a perfect location near a spring-fed oasis where two ancient trails intersected. Providing natural advantages for both defense and commerce, the chosen site offered everything they needed: abundant water, grazing land for horses, proximity to game animals, and strategic positioning that would make it valuable to travelers crossing the desert. Samuel used his knowledge of land laws to research the legal status of the area, discovering that it remained unclaimed government territory that could potentially be purchased or leased through proper channels. Establishing legal ownership would require navigating complex bureaucratic processes and potentially hostile government officials. Samuel's status as a white American citizen would be crucial in these negotiations, but his association with Apache people could also create serious complications. The political climate of the late 1800s was generally unfavorable toward Native American rights and interests. Running Bear's strategic thinking proved invaluable in developing their approach. Rather than attempting to claim land rights as an Apache tribe, which would likely be rejected immediately, they would position themselves as a private business enterprise, offering services to travelers and traders. Samuel would be the official landowner, with the Apache members serving as employees and partners in various capacities. This arrangement required careful legal structuring to protect everyone's interests while complying with territorial laws. Dr. Whitmore's connections in the territorial capital proved helpful in identifying sympathetic lawyers and officials who might be willing to assist with the complex paperwork and regulatory requirements. The first major test of their partnership came when a group of cavalry soldiers discovered their temporary camp during a routine patrol. The soldiers were immediately suspicious of finding a white man living among Apache people, especially given recent tensions and scattered reports of raiding activity in the region. Samuel's calm explanations and Dr. Whitmore's professional endorsement eventually satisfied the military officers. But the encounter highlighted the delicate nature of their situation. Any perceived threat to white settlers or interference with military operations could result in immediate and devastating consequences for the entire group, too. To address these concerns, Samuel began cultivating relationships with local military commanders and territorial officials. He positioned himself as a valuable asset who could provide intelligence about Apache movements, serve as a negotiator in potential conflicts, and help maintain peaceful relationships between white settlers and remaining tribal groups. This strategy required delicate balancing of loyalties and interests. Samuel needed to maintain the trust of his Apache family while also satisfying the expectations of white authorities who viewed him as their representative within the tribal community. The challenge was enormous, but success would create unprecedented opportunities for peaceful coexistence. Meanwhile, practical preparations for the permanent settlement continued steadily. The tribe members used traditional Apache construction techniques to build structures suited to the desert environment. While Samuel contributed knowledge of ranch buildings and facilities that would be needed for their planned business operations. Little Wolf, now fully recovered and energetic, became Samuel's eager assistant in many projects. The boy's quick intelligence and natural curiosity made him an ideal student for learning both Apache traditions and white man's skills. His bilingual abilities developed rapidly, and he often served as translator during complex discussions about the settlement's future. The silver dollar that had started Samuel's transformation remained in his possession, but its meaning continued to evolve. What had begun as payment for a desperate trade had become a symbol of the trust and cooperation that bound the diverse group together. Samuel often fingered the coin during difficult moments, reminding himself of the commitment he had made and the faith others had placed in him. As winter approached, the settlement site began to take shape. Basic structures provided shelter from harsh weather, while careful planning laid the groundwork for the more ambitious facilities that would be needed once their business operations began in earnest. Each day brought new challenges and small victories that strengthened the group's confidence in their It's an unprecedented experiment. The most significant test would come with spring, when they planned to officially establish their business and begin serving travelers on the increasingly busy trade routes that crossed their territory. Success would validate Running Bear's prophetic vision and create a model for Apache survival in the changing world. Failure could mean imprisonment, death, or forced relocation to the reservation system they had fought so hard to avoid. Spring arrived with unprecedented challenges and opportunities. The first travelers to discover their settlement were Mexican traders heading north with goods from Sonora. Samuel's ability to speak Spanish, combined with the Apache knowledge of desert routes and water sources, created an immediate business opportunity that exceeded their most optimistic expectations. The traders were desperately in need of fresh horses, reliable guides, and accurate information about military activities along their intended route. Samuel's white status provided credibility, while the Apache members offered expertise that could mean the difference between profit and disaster for the merchant caravan. The successful completion of this first business transaction established their reputation and brought word-of-mouth advertising that attracted additional customers. Within weeks, their strategic location became known throughout the region's trading network. American merchants heading south, Mexican traders going north, military supply trains, and even occasional wagon trains of settlers began including their settlement as a planned stop. The variety of services they could provide: fresh horses, experienced guides, medical treatment, equipment repairs, and essential supplies made them valuable to virtually every type of traveler. Dr. Whitmore's regular visits proved crucial to their growing reputation. His medical skills had saved the lives of several travelers who arrived at the settlement suffering from injuries or illnesses that would have proven fatal without prompt treatment. Word spread quickly that competent medical care was available at the remote desert outpost, attracting customers who might not otherwise have risked the dangerous journey. The financial success brought new complications and responsibilities. Samuel found himself managing increasingly complex business relationships while trying to maintain the delicate balance between Apache traditions and white expectations. Some customers were clearly uncomfortable dealing with Apache people, while others were fascinated by the opportunity to interact safely with members of a culture they had only known through fearful stories and sensationalized newspaper accounts. Running Bear's wisdom proved invaluable in navigating these cultural challenges. The old medicine man understood that success depended on making white customers feel comfortable while never compromising the dignity and values of his people. He established careful protocols for interactions, ensuring that Apache members were always treated with appropriate respect while also meeting the business needs of their diverse clientele. The settlements' growing prosperity attracted attention from unexpected sources. Territorial officials began taking notice of this successful business operation that seemed to contradict prevailing assumptions about Apache capabilities and intentions. Some officials were genuinely interested in the settlement as a potential model for peaceful Native American integration, while others remained deeply suspicious of any Apache activity outside of reservation boundaries. Samuel's careful cultivation of relationships with military and civilian authorities proved essential during this critical period. His reputation for honesty and reliability had spread throughout the territorial administrative network, providing him with advocates who could defend the settlement against hostile officials seeking to shut down their operations. The most serious challenge came when a group of Apache raiders attacked a settler family just 50 miles from their location. The incident reignited anti-Apache sentiment throughout the territory and created immediate pressure for a military action against any Apache people found outside reservations. Samuel knew that his adopted family would be among the first targets if authorities decided to implement a policy of forced relocations or military strikes. Working desperately to protect his Apache family, Samuel traveled to the territorial capital to meet personally with senior officials. He presented detailed evidence of the settlement's peaceful activities and valuable contributions to regional commerce, while also offering to assist military authorities in tracking down the actual raiders responsible for the attacks. The negotiations were tense and politically complex. Samuel had to convince skeptical officials that his Apache partners were not only innocent of any hostile activities, but actively beneficial to territorial interests. He emphasized their role in gathering intelligence about potentially dangerous tribal movements and their value as intermediaries who could help prevent future conflicts. These discussions revealed the broader political context affecting all Apache people in the region. Pressure was mounting for a final military campaign that would force all remaining free Apache bands onto reservations, regardless of their individual circumstances or peaceful intentions. Samuel realized that his adopted family's survival depended on demonstrating their unique value to territorial authorities in ways that could not be easily replaced or replicated. The solution came through an unexpected alliance with a progressive territorial judge named William Harrison, who had become interested in the settlement as a potential alternative to the expensive and often unsuccessful reservation system. Judge Harrison recognized that forcing peaceful Apache groups onto reservations often created more problems than it solved, while innovative arrangements like Samuel's settlement might offer better outcomes for everyone involved. With Judge Harrison's support, Samuel negotiated a formal agreement that granted the settlement official recognition as a licensed trading post and way station. The Apache members would be classified as legal employees rather than reservation escapees, providing them with protection under territorial law while allowing them to maintain their cultural identity and traditional practices. This legal recognition transformed everything. The settlement was no longer operating in the gray areas of territorial law, but had become an official business enterprise with legitimate standing and government protection. The arrangement provided a model that could potentially be replicated elsewhere, offering hope for other Apache groups seeking alternatives to reservation life. The success attracted visitors beyond mere customers and travelers. Journalists, government officials, and even curious tourists began arriving to witness this unprecedented example of successful Apache white cooperation. Samuel found himself frequently serving as spokesperson and interpreter, explaining their unique arrangement to audiences ranging from sympathetic reformers to skeptical military officers. Running Bear embraced this educational role with characteristic wisdom and dignity. He understood that their settlement's survival might depend on changing white attitudes toward Apache people, and he saw each visitor as an opportunity to demonstrate Apache intelligence, adaptability, and peaceful intentions. His impressive presence and obvious leadership abilities challenged prevailing stereotypes and forced visitors to reconsider their assumptions about Native American capabilities. Little Wolf, now thriving under these new circumstances, had become something of a symbol for the settlement's success. His complete recovery from near-death illness, his bilingual abilities, and his bright intelligence impressed every visitor who met him. The boy represented the potential for Apache children to adapt and succeed in the changing world while maintaining their cultural identity. the financial prosperity enabled. Improvements that made the settlement more comfortable and efficient. Better buildings, improved facilities, and expanded services attracted additional customers while providing employment opportunities for Apache family members according to their individual skills and interests. Morningstar became renowned for her traditional crafts. While laughing, Waters' language abilities made her valuable as a translator and cultural interpreter. As summer arrived, Samuel reflected on the extraordinary transformation that had begun with a simple trade of his stallion for a silver dollar. What had seemed like an impulsive act of compassion had evolved into something far beyond his original imagination: thriving business, a loving family, and a potential model for peaceful coexistence between two very different cultures. Thunder had played his part in this transformation, carrying Dr. Whitmore on that crucial first journey and serving as the foundation for all the success that followed. The magnificent stallion now led a small herd of horses that had become essential to the settlement's operations. His intelligence and loyalty unchanged despite the dramatic changes in their circumstances. The silver dollar remained in Samuel's pocket, its symbolic importance growing with each passing month. What had begun as payment for a desperate trade had become a tangible reminder of the power of generosity, trust, and mutual respect to overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. The settlement's reputation continued to grow throughout the summer, attracting attention from the highest levels of territorial government. Samuel received an unexpected invitation to address the territorial legislature about their unique arrangement, an opportunity that could either secure their future permanently or expose them to dangerous political scrutiny. The invitation came through Judge Harrison, who had become their most powerful advocate in government circles. The legislature was considering new policies regarding Native American affairs, and progressive members wanted to present the settlement as evidence that alternatives to the reservation system could work effectively. Conservative members, however, viewed the invitation as an opportunity to expose what they considered dangerous precedents that might encourage other Apache groups to resist relocation. Samuel spent weeks preparing for this crucial presentation, working closely with Running Bear to ensure that their message would accurately represent both Apache perspectives and practical realities. They knew that their words could influence policies affecting thousands of Native American people throughout the territory, making the stakes far higher than their settlement's individual survival. The journey to the territorial capital required leaving the settlement in the capable hands of Stone Bear and Dr. Whitmore, who had agreed to maintain operations during Samuel's absence. Thunder carried Samuel across familiar desert trails that now seemed like pathways to an uncertain future rather than routes to known destinations. The territorial capital buzzed with political tension and conflicting interests. Samuel quickly learned that their settlement had become a symbol in larger debates about territorial development, military spending, and federal Indian policy. Supporters saw them as proof that peaceful cooperation was possible, while opponents viewed them as naive idealists whose success was either exaggerated or unsustainable. The legislative session attracted newspaper reporters from across the region, transforming Samuel's presentation into a nationally significant event. His words would be read by government officials in Washington, military commanders throughout the West, and Apache leaders trying to determine their own strategies for survival in rapidly changing circumstances. Standing before the assembled legislators, Samuel drew upon everything he had learned during his months with Running Bear's family. He spoke not just about business success and peaceful cooperation, but about the deeper human qualities he had discovered in Apache culture: the wisdom of elders, the importance of community responsibility, the sophisticated understanding of environmental balance that enabled survival in harsh desert conditions. His most powerful moments came when he described Little Wolf's recovery and subsequent development into a bright, bilingual child who represented the potential for Apache youth to adapt successfully while maintaining their cultural identity. Samuel's obvious emotional connection to his adopted family resonated with legislators who had expected a dry recitation of business statistics and policy recommendations. Questions from the floor revealed the complex political calculations affecting their situation. Military representatives worried about precedents that might encourage Apache resistance to reservation policies. Business interests were intrigued by the economic benefits of peaceful trading relationships. Humanitarian reformers saw validation of their arguments for treating Native Americans with greater respect and consideration. The most challenging questions came from legislators who demanded specific details about the settlement's security arrangements and potential risks to white travelers and settlers. Samuel had to demonstrate that their Apache partners were not only peaceful, but actively helpful in maintaining regional stability and preventing conflicts that could threaten everyone's safety. Running Bear's strategic thinking had anticipated these concerns, and Samuel was able to present detailed examples of how the settlement had helped military authorities track hostile bands, warn travelers about dangerous conditions, and served as intermediaries in preventing misunderstandings that could escalate into violence. The presentation's climax came when Samuel produced the silver dollar that had started his transformation, explaining its symbolic importance and demonstrating how small acts of trust and generosity could create unexpected opportunities for mutual benefit. The simple coin represented everything their settlement had accomplished, proof that traditional enemies could become trusted partners when circumstances encouraged cooperation rather than conflict. The legislative response was mixed, but generally positive. Progressive members praised the settlement as an innovative solution that saved taxpayer money while achieving better outcomes than expensive military campaigns and reservation maintenance. Conservative members remained skeptical but acknowledged the practical benefits of having reliable intelligence sources and peaceful trading partners in strategically important locations. The final vote authorized continued operation of the settlement under existing arrangements while commissioning a formal study of whether similar arrangements might be established elsewhere in the territory. This outcome provided security for Running Bear's family while opening possibilities for other Apache groups seeking alternatives to reservation life. Samuel's return journey to the settlement brought unexpected encounters with other Apache leaders who had learned about the legislative proceedings through the extensive tribal communication networks that connected bands across vast distances. Some were interested in exploring similar arrangements for their own people, while others remained convinced that armed resistance offered the only hope for maintaining Apache independence. These conversations revealed the broader impact of their settlement's success. Word had spread throughout Apache communities about the possibility of maintaining cultural identity while adapting to new economic and political realities. Young Apache people especially were interested in learning English and acquiring skills that might enable them to navigate the white-dominated world without abandoning their heritage. The settlement welcomed Samuel's return with celebration and relief. His successful presentation to the legislature had secured their legal status while raising their profile as a model for peaceful coexistence. Business continued to grow as word spread about government endorsement of their operations, attracting customers who had previously been cautious about dealing with Apache-associated enterprises. Dr. Whitmore reported remarkable developments during Samuel's absence. Little Wolf had been teaching other children basic English phrases, creating an informal school that was attracting families from distant Apache bands. Laughing Water had begun documenting traditional stories and medicinal knowledge, creating written records that could preserve Apache culture for future generations. These educational activities represented natural evolution of the settlement's mission beyond mere business success. They were becoming a center for cultural preservation and adaptation that could serve Apache communities throughout the region. The combination of traditional knowledge and modern skills created unique opportunities for Apache youth to prepare for the future while maintaining connections to their heritage. The most significant development was Morningstar's pregnancy, announced during Samuel's first week back. The child would be born into circumstances no previous Apache generation had experienced: legal protection, economic security, and opportunities for education that bridged both cultures. Little Wolf was excited about becoming a big brother, and had already begun planning ways to teach the new baby both Apache traditions and English language skills. This news brought profound emotional meaning to Samuel's transformation. He had arrived at their camp as a solitary traveler seeking nothing more than water for his horse. Now he was part of a growing family preparing to welcome a new generation that would inherit the unprecedented opportunities their sacrifices had created. The silver dollar in his pocket seemed to grow warmer as Samuel contemplated these changes. What had begun as payment for a desperate trade had become the foundation for something far more significant than anyone could have imagined. This simple transaction had created ripple effects that were now influencing territorial policy, inspiring other Apache groups, and offering hope for peaceful solutions to conflicts that had seemed insurmountable just months earlier. 2 years after Samuel's first desperate trade of thunder for a silver dollar, the settlement had become the most successful trading post in the territory. The modest camp beside a desert spring had grown into a thriving community of permanent buildings, cultivated gardens, and bustling commerce that attracted visitors from across the Southwest. The transformation extended far beyond physical improvements. 3 additional Apache families had joined the original group, drawn by opportunities for their children to receive education while maintaining cultural traditions. A small school operated daily where Apache and white children learned together in both English and Apache languages, creating a generation uniquely prepared for the changing world. Little Wolf, now a confident and articulate boy of 10, served as unofficial ambassador for visiting dignitaries and curious travelers. His easy movement between Apache and white cultures impressed everyone who met him, demonstrating the potential for successful integration without cultural abandonment. He often accompanied Samuel on business trips, his bilingual skills and natural intelligence making him valuable in negotiations and relationship. Building Morningstar's son, born the previous spring, had been named Bridgewalker in honor of the settlement's role in connecting different worlds. The healthy, happy baby represented hope for the future and validation of Running Bear's prophetic vision. The old medicine man often held his youngest grandson while sharing stories about the ancient prophecies that had guided their remarkable journey. Dr. Whitmore had relocated his primary practice to the settlement, finding that his services were in constant demand from travelers, local Apache families, and even residents of distant towns who made special trips for medical treatment. His combination of Western medicine and Apache traditional healing knowledge had created innovative treatments that were attracting attention from medical colleges back east. The settlement's success had inspired similar arrangements throughout the territory. 5 other Apache white partnerships had been established, each adapted to local conditions and opportunities, but following the basic model of mutual cooperation and shared benefits. Samuel frequently traveled as a consultant, helping other groups navigate the complex legal and cultural challenges involved in creating sustainable partnerships. The financial prosperity had exceeded everyone's expectations. The settlement generated enough income to support not only the resident families, but also to provide assistance to Apache relatives still struggling on reservations or hiding in remote mountain areas. They had become a lifeline for Apache people seeking alternatives to the limited options previously available. Running Bear's health had declined over the past year, but his spirit remained strong, and his influence on settlement affairs continued undiminished. He spent most days teaching traditional stories and ceremonies to the younger generation, ensuring that Apache spiritual and cultural knowledge would survive despite the dramatic changes in their way of life. The old medicine man often spoke about the fulfillment of ancient prophecies and the arrival of new spiritual challenges that would require wisdom from both Apache and white traditions. He had begun training Little Wolf in ceremonial responsibilities, preparing the boy to serve as a cultural bridge for future generations. Thunder remained the settlement's most prized possession, now leading a herd of over 30 horses that provided transportation, breeding stock, and trade goods for the thriving business. The magnificent Stallion had sired numerous foals that inherited his intelligence and stamina, creating a bloodline that was becoming famous throughout the region. For quality and reliability, Samuel's reputation had grown to legendary proportions among both Apache and white communities. Stories of his original trade and subsequent transformation had been repeated and embellished countless times, creating a mythology that sometimes embarrassed him but also served important purposes in encouraging others to consider peaceful alternatives to conflict and mistrust. The silver dollar that had started everything remained in Samuel's pocket, Though its significance had evolved beyond personal symbolism, he often showed the coin to visitors when telling the settlement's origin story, using it to illustrate how small acts of trust and generosity could create enormous positive changes when circumstances aligned properly. The most remarkable development had been Samuel's formal adoption into Apache culture through an elaborate ceremony conducted by Running Bear and tribal elders from several bands. He was now considered a full Apache brother with all the rights and responsibilities that membership entailed, while also maintaining his status as a white American citizen, a unique dual identity that reflected the settlement's bridging function. This formal recognition had profound emotional meaning for Samuel, who had found in Apache culture the sense of belonging and purpose that had been missing from his earlier life. The values of community responsibility, respect for elders, and harmony with natural environments had become integral to his character in ways that influenced every aspect of his daily activities. The settlement's educational programs had attracted attention from federal officials interested in alternative approaches to Native American education. Rather than forcing Apache children to abandon their culture in distant boarding schools, the settlement demonstrated how traditional knowledge could be preserved while also providing practical skills needed for success in the broader American society. Laughing Water had emerged as a gifted teacher and cultural preservationist, creating written records of Apache stories, songs, and medicinal knowledge that might otherwise have been lost as elders passed away. Her work was being studied by anthropologists and historians who recognized its importance for understanding Apache civilization and contributions to American culture. The settlement's influence extended beyond economic and educational achievements. It had become a symbol of hope for peaceful coexistence that inspired similar efforts throughout the American West. Government policies toward Native Americans were beginning to reflect greater recognition that cooperation might achieve better results than continued military campaigns and forced relocations. Samuel often reflected on the chain of events that had brought him to this remarkable life. His original journey toward Colorado's mining camps seemed like a story from someone else's existence, bearing little resemblance to the complex responsibilities and deep satisfactions of his current role as a cultural bridge builder and community leader. The prophecy that Running Bear had shared during their first meeting had proven accurate in ways none of them could have anticipated. The Pale Rider had indeed brought transformation to Apache people, but the changes had flowed in both directions, creating new possibilities for everyone involved rather than simply imposing white dominance over Apache traditions. As the sun set over the thriving settlement, Samuel stood beside Thunder in the horse corral, watching children play games that combined Apache and white elements, while their parents conducted business in languages that bridged different worlds. The silver dollar felt warm in his palm as he considered the incredible journey that had begun with a simple act of compassion in a desperate moment. The transformation was complete, but the story was far from finished. New challenges and opportunities arose constantly, requiring continued adaptation and growth from everyone in the community. Samuel knew that his greatest responsibility was ensuring that the next generation inherited not just the material success they had achieved, but also the wisdom and values that had made such success possible. Running Bear had been right about the prophecy, but the fulfillment had exceeded even the old medicine man's visionary expectations. The Pale Rider's arrival had indeed transformed Apache fate, but in the process, the Apache people had also transformed the Pale Rider's destiny in ways that created benefits extending far beyond any single community or culture.